confident in their salvation that they went wild. More than anything, Paul is talking about holy living. Life is to be lived in honor of God. Paul has made an assumption, perhaps, that each person knows in himself or herself if he or she is living a life that honors God. I dare say that if we honor one another, we honor God. Paul cautions that the Thessalonians not delve into whether other people are living honorably. I'm going to say that one more time. Paul cautions that the Thessalonians not delve into whether other people are living honorably. It requires the investment of all of our time and all of our energy just to figure it out for ourselves. He writes, live quietly. Mind your own affairs. And work with your hands. Keeps you busy. Also, it is important to understand what he is not saying. When he says, mind your own affairs, he is not saying, stay isolated, isolate yourself, separate yourself, have no regard for the needs of others. He is simply saying, have no comment or thought about the needs of others. Help them as best you can. He is saying something like, keep your mind, your thoughts, your imagination out of the bank accounts, the driveway, the garage, the backyard, the living room, the kitchen, and the bedroom of your neighbors. Well, you need to keep your body out of there too, but that's supposed to go without saying. Some folks need things spelled out for them. Some folks need absolutes and rules. How many of you have ever done paint by numbers? Have you changed the paint color? The number said you were supposed to use orange, but you liked purple. So you ignored the number. In that moment, did you wonder if you were disrespecting the number? Did you wonder if you were discounting the orange or giving purple an opportunity to try something new? It is likely you just liked purple better than orange. Paul has an expectation that we think about the choices we make and the consequences of those choices. Do you remember when you were kids? When you were little and you gave or when your kids were little and you gave them coloring books and crayons? Remember? Were you one of those parents who constantly was trying to get your child to color inside the lines? Helping them to color inside the lines? Or did you admire the coloring done outside the lines? Did any of you rebel when you were teenagers against the strict rules laid down by your parents? Did you do dumb things? We indulged that behavior, that is that daring behavior, that behavior that defies convention. I venture to say every one of us did to some extent. But that defiance was for many a step toward growth. The decision to move out of the house, defiance perhaps, but a bid to figure out how to stand on our own 2 feet. We have a tendency to see Paul as a fundamentalist in his thinking. But in truth, he, I think, is a first things first kind of guy. You cannot walk until you crawl. You cannot form words until you comprehend that the sounds coming from your mouth can actually be understood by others. What exactly is Paul saying? Is he dictating to the Thessalonians, giving them a prescription for Christian living? Well, if Paul had lived, his letters would have continued. And the letter written to the church in Thessalonica in the year 71 might have sounded very, very different from this one written in the year 51. The Thessalonians would have changed by then, as do all societies and all peoples. Society has changed radically, and behaviors that were not accepted in the 20th century are part and parcel of the 21st century here in North America. In the 70s, in Arizona, the state passed a law against cohabitation. Now, how they plan to enforce that, I can't even imagine. It was beyond my realm of comprehension. But they would find you if they caught you, and they'd throw you in the clinic. I moved to California anyway. But cohabiting is what lots of people do. People of all ages, I might add, these days. The social issues of Paul's day are not the social issues of today. So how do we live holy lives in this day and age? The place from which Paul begins every teaching is this: we are creatures of God, and we are not at liberty to do as we please. We honor God by honoring ourselves and the rest of humankind. The tradition of coming to church on the Sabbath is one of the things that we do to honor God. But we need to see it as even more than that. It is one of the things we do to honor our community of faith, our church family. When we come to church, we are saying to each other that it is important to be together, to discover more and more about our faith together. It is important to explore more and more about our relationship with God together. And in learning more, we receive more, and thus we have more to offer others. What is this business about more and more? Think of Paul's notion of more, like cake decorating. Cake decorators put the frosting on the cake. There are many who would say that the frosting is extra, that a good cake doesn't need frosting to taste good. But Paul is calling for frosting on the cake. John Wesley might define the more and more that Paul talks about as the striving for Christian perfection. For Wesley, we are always to be about the task of moving on toward it. We are always to be about seeking to live holy lives that honor God. Always moving onward, perfecting our lives, more and more and more and more. Many people have had trouble over the centuries understanding Wesley's doctrine of Christian perfection. Well, I'll tell you, I took it on and tried to tackle